Imagine, like, just for a second, waking up in your own bed.
Right, just a normal morning.
Exactly. You're making your morning coffee, going about your daily routine, completely unaware that the actual ground beneath your house has physically risen overnight.
Oh man, that is a wild thought.
I mean, I don't mean just a little frost heave in the garden or, a shift in the floorboards.
Yeah, no, we are talking way bigger than that.
Right. I mean, the entire foundational crust of your world has been pushed upward by this massive, practically invisible ocean of molten rock that it surged from the deep earth,
And completely undetected by anyone sleeping on the surface.
which is it's terrifying.
Eh,
But today, we are taking a deep dive into exactly that scenario. We're looking at the Azores archipelago, specifically Portugal's San Jorge Island, back in March of 2022.
yeah, this is such a fascinating case study.
It really is. So we're pulling from a May 14, 2026 Science Daily article, which covers this new research led by University College London, or UCL, and published in Nature Communications.
And their mission here was really to uncover how a catastrophic volcanic eruption was just narrowly avoided, right?
Exactly. Like, why did this massive geological event happen almost completely in silence?
Mm-hmm.
And how is this phenomenon, what they call a failed eruption, changing everything scientists know about volcano forecasting?
It really forces you to reevaluate the stability of the ground you're standing on, you know? We treat the Earth's surface like this fixed, permanent stage.
Right, like concrete.
Yeah, but an event like this just strips away that illusion entirely. It reminds you that we are living on this remarkably thin, fragile skin stretched over an active, highly pressurized system.
And that pressurized system nearly broke through in a catastrophic way on San Jorge. So let's unpack this. The data shows that this body of magma surged from a depth of over 20 kilometers up to just 1.6 kilometers below the surface.
Which is incredibly shallow in geological terms.
And it did that in just a matter of days. I mean, I tried to do the math on the volume they described, and it is staggering.
The 32,000 swimming pools?
Yes. The researchers estimated the intrusion was roughly equivalent to 32,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools of magma.
That is just an astronomical amount of molten rock.
Right, moving that much volume up almost 18 kilometers through the Earth's crust in a few days.
Okay.
You would think something like that should sound like a continuous freight train of earthquakes.
Oh, absolutely.
Like it should be tearing the crust apart, setting off every seismic sensor from the Azores to mainland Europe. It's like an ocean of molten rock sneaking up into the attic of a house without waking anyone sleeping on the floors below.
That's a great analogy, and that's exactly what's so fascinating here, that traditional warning signs were just absent.
But how? How does something that massive move that fast without making a sound?
Well, see, you're assuming the magma has to violently shatter pristine, unbroken bedrock to make room for itself.
Right, breaking rock makes noise.
Exactly. That's typically what generates the seismic chatter we track during an intrusion. But the lead author, Dr. Stephen Hicks from UCL, he characterized this as a stealthy intrusion. He literally said the magma moved quickly through the crust, but much of its journey was silent.
That is wild.
Right. The thousands of earthquakes that eventually terrified the local population there, they mostly occurred only after the magma had already hit the brakes at that 1.6-kilometer mark.
Okay, wait. So if it isn't shattering the bedrock, is it just exploiting existing plumbing?
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, I'm picturing water finding the path of least resistance through a cracked foundation. If the cracks are already there, the water doesn't need to break the concrete to get in.
That is a very apt way to look at it, honestly. The crust beneath the Azores is already highly fractured from, millions of years of tectonic activity.
So the magma just takes the easy route.
Exactly. It utilized those pre-existing deep fissures. Because it wasn't expending energy fracturing new rock, the acoustic footprint, the earthquakes, was minimal during that actual rapid ascent.
Oh, well, so the earthquakes came later.
Yeah, the massive earthquake swarms that followed were largely just the surrounding crust reacting and adjusting to the sudden, massive injection of new volume that was now permanently parked just a mile below the island.
Which makes tracking it sound like an absolute nightmare.
Oh, a total nightmare.
I mean, if the initial surge doesn't trigger the seismic alarms, how on earth do you map an invisible river of rock? by the time the earthquake started, the monster was already in the attic.
Right, and you certainly can't rely on just a handful of land-based seismometers for that. To track a seismic intrusion, especially one this quiet, you have to measure the physical distortion it leaves behind.
Okay, so the surface lifting.
Exactly. When that much magma parks itself in the shallow crust, it needs physical space. It displaces the rock above it, actually pushing the entire island upward.
And the article said the surface of San Jorge was lifted by about 6 centimeters.
Which is huge for a whole landmass.
6 centimeters across an entire island. The amount of geological energy required to achieve that kind of ground deformation is just, it's hard to fathom.
It really is.
But, you can't just see a 6-centimeter lift with the naked eye. So if the magma's journey was mostly silent, how do they actually confirm what was happening? I know they use satellite data, but how does a satellite hundreds of miles in orbit measure a shift that small?
Right, so they use this technology called INSAR.
INSAR.
Yeah, it stands for Interferometric Synthetic Aperture Radar.
Okay, that's a mouthful.
It is, yeah. But basically, instead of taking a standard optical photograph, the satellite beams radar waves down to the Earth's surface and measures the exact time it takes for that signal to bounce back.
Oh, interesting.
So by comparing a radar pass from before the event to a pass during the event, researchers can look at the phase shift in those returning waves.
And that tells them the ground moved.
Exactly. It creates this incredibly precise, millimeter-accurate map of how the ground has bulged or deformed.
So the radar is essentially giving them a high-definition topographic map of the island, like inflating like a lung.
That's exactly it. The ground deformation captured by satellites is the definitive proof that magma entered the shallow crust. It's the puzzle piece that confirmed this was a failed eruption.
Wow.
But to get a true 3D picture of this invisible threat, they still needed to understand the mechanics of the crust below it. They needed to pinpoint exactly where those delayed earthquake clusters were happening.
Right, because San Jorge is a really narrow, steep island, right?
Very narrow. So putting sensors solely on land leaves massive blind spots. You get a terrible geometric angle on the earthquakes happening deep below the coastline.
They had to take the sensors off the island entirely.
Yes.
The source mentioned deploying instruments to the Atlantic seafloor. And I imagine dropping delicate scientific equipment into the deep ocean isn't exactly a straightforward process.
Oh, it is a massive logistical hurdle. I mean, you are dealing with ocean bottom seismometers or OBS units.
Right.
These are heavy, highly specialized spheres designed to free fall to the seafloor, withstand immense hydrostatic pressure, record data for months, and then release their anchor on acoustic command to float back up.
You definitely don't just toss them off the back of a fishing boat.
Definitely not. Which is why there's this huge emphasis in the paper on the transnational scramble to get this done.
Yeah, Professor Anna Ferrer from UCL emphasized the tremendous collective effort. She talked about needing emergency funding from the UK's Natural Environment Research Council just to get the gear, then relying on the Portuguese Navy to actually deploy it offshore.
And involving institutions from the UK, Spain, and Portugal. Without that international pooling of resources, the study would have been impossible.
Yeah.
Dr. Ricardo Ramalho from Cardiff University actually highlighted the immense value of combining onshore and offshore geophysical data. By surrounding the island with sensors, they eliminated those blind spots, giving accurate detection of where the rock was fracturing and whether a surface eruption was imminent.
But it wasn't imminent, which is like the million-dollar mystery here.
Right.
We have 32,000 swimming pools of highly pressurized magma shooting up from the deep earth at incredible speed. It gets to within a mile of the surface, and then it just stops.
It just stalls out.
Yeah. Why did it stop? Did it hit an impenetrable layer of bedrock or something?
No, it actually didn't hit a physical wall at all. To understand the sudden stop, you have to look at the engine driving the magma in the first place.
Okay, what drives it?
Magma is driven upward by two main things: thermal buoyancy and, more importantly, the exsolution of gases.
Exsolution.
Yeah, so as magma rises and the surrounding pressure decreases, dissolved volatiles like water vapor, carbon dioxide, and sulfur dioxide, they begin to form bubbles.
Oh, kind of like untwisting the cap on a bottle of heavily carbonated soda. The bubbles rapidly expand and force the liquid up the neck.
Yes, that is the exact mechanism. If those expanding gas bubbles remain trapped within the molten rock, the internal pressure just continues to skyrocket, driving the magma upward with increasing violence until it breaches the surface.
Right, an explosion.
Exactly. But the pathway this magma took was the Pico do Carvão fault zone. This is one of the island's major fault systems, historically known for generating powerful, destructive earthquakes.
Wait, I would assume hitting a major, historically active fault line is a worst-case scenario. It seems like throwing a match into a powder keg.
You would think so. But instead of one giant quake, the 2022 unrest triggered thousands of smaller, clustered quakes. Because the fault was already so heavily fractured from centuries of tectonic stress, the rock matrix was highly permeable.
Permeable, meaning things can pass through it.
Exactly. Dr. Pablo J. Gonzalez from the Spanish National Research Council summed up the resulting dynamic perfectly. He said, the fault acted like both a highway and a leak.
A highway and a leak. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
So this major fault line is basically acting like a pressure cooker, popping its safety valve just before it blows.
Yes. The highly permeable fault allowed the gases to just bleed away sideways into the surrounding crust rather than remaining trapped in the magma. And without that rapidly expanding gas pressure acting as an engine, the magma lost its upward momentum. It simply ran out of steam, stalled at 1.6 kilometers, and began to slowly cool and crystallize into solid rock.
That is an unbelievable geological paradox.
Yeah.
The very thing that makes the island incredibly dangerous, a massive fault line capable of tearing the landscape apart, is the exact mechanism that diffused the bomb and saved the island from a volcanic catastrophe.
It really is. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it forces a total shift in perspective.
How so?
Well, we view these events through the lens of human hazard, right? But from a planetary perspective, this is simply how islands are constructed.
Oh, sure.
A failed eruption is essentially successful land building. A significant portion of any volcanic island's mass isn't formed by material erupting onto the surface, but by these deep intrusions creeping up, stalling out, and solidifying to reinforce the island's foundation from the inside out.
Which is fascinating, but if I'm living in the Azores or Hawaii or Iceland, the island building aspect is probably secondary to my house not getting vaporized.
Oh, absolutely. Fair point.
So what does this highway and leak discovery mean for us, for how we handle volcano forecasting? If a stealth magma surge can sneak up to just a mile below the surface with limited warnings using regional faults, does that mean our current warning systems are looking for the wrong clues?
Well, this raises an important question. I wouldn't say we're looking for the wrong clues, but we perhaps have too narrow of an aperture. Historically, volcanic hazard monitoring has been heavily centralized. You place your densest networks of seismometers and gas sensors directly over the main volcanic vent, or the caldera.
Right, you monitor the primary chimney, because that's where the smoke comes out, so you assume that's where the fire will start.
Exactly. But the 2022 San Jorge event proves that catastrophic volumes of magma can bypass the main chimney entirely.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it can migrate laterally from deep sources and shoot up through regional fault systems miles away from the recognized volcanic center. If we only monitor the crater, we're essentially leaving the back door wide open.
So we have to monitor the entire plumbing system, not just the drain.
We really do. We have to rigorously monitor the surrounding fault lines, deploy much wider distributed acoustic and seismic networks, and crucially, we have to employ complex transnational offshore and onshore data grids.
Like what they did here with the ocean sensors and the satellite.
Exactly. Integrating satellite radar like INSAR as a primary early warning tool is vital, rather than just using it as a forensic tool after the shaking starts. Because if an intrusion is stealthy, if it isn't breaking rock, the only early warning we might get is a slight, silent swelling of the ground measured from space.
It paints a picture of a much more complex, interconnected threat. Let's recap the journey we just took, because the scale of this is just breathtaking.
It really is.
We unpacked an event where an ocean of magma enough to fill 32,000 swimming pools raced silently from 20 kilometers underground to within a mile of the surface of Portugal's San Jorge Island in just a matter of days.
A surge that happened with virtually no initial seismic warning, lifting an entire island by 6 centimeters.
Right, and it was only tracked by a massive transnational effort combining space-based radar with sensors dropped to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. And the craziest part, the entire catastrophic event was halted, not by any human intervention, but by a leaky fault line that acted as a geological safety valve.
Exactly, bleeding off the gas pressure and turning a potential disaster into just a quiet subterranean addition to the island's foundation.
It's amazing.
Knowledge like this proves why we must constantly question our assumptions. In this case, the assumption that massive geological events always announce themselves loudly.
It is a phenomenal reminder of how dynamic our planet actually is. So here's a final thought for you to mull over long after we wrap up today's deep dive. If a subterranean river of molten rock can rapidly surge upward and permanently reshape the foundation of an entire island while remaining practically silent to the people standing just a single mile above it,
Yeah.
what other massive invisible changes are shifting the ground beneath our own feet right now, completely undetected? Keep wondering, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.